The paper trembled in Michael Hale's hand. "Sir, are you all right?" his assistant asked, watching the most powerful man in the room go pale over a janitor's application form. Michael didn't answer. He just stared at the name typed in black ink, Daniel Reeves, and felt 9 years collapse into a single second. "Get him back in this building," Michael said quietly. "Right now. Don't let him leave the parking lot." Before we go further into how a broke, exhausted single father ended up mopping the floors of the one man who had been searching for him for almost a decade, welcome back to Grandpa's Story Chair. If you believe in kindness and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It genuinely helps this old chair keep telling stories like this one. And before we begin, tell me in the comments which country you're watching from and what city. I read every single one. And honestly, some of my favorite moments come from seeing how far these stories travel. A story like Daniel's deserves to be heard everywhere. Now let's go back. Back before the interview. Back before the janitor's uniform. Back to a small apartment on the edge of town, where a tired father was counting coins on a kitchen table, with absolutely no idea that fate was about to walk him straight through the front doors of Hale Industries. Daniel Reeves was 41 years old, and most days, he felt 60. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on Maple Row, in a part of the city where the streetlights flickered more than they worked, and the walls were thin enough that you could hear your neighbor's television through the plaster. It wasn't much, but it was clean, it was paid for barely, and it was home to the 2 people Daniel loved most in the world, himself and his 10-year-old daughter, Lily. Lily had her mother's eyes. Daniel didn't like to think about that too often. Her mother, Rachel, had passed away when Lily was just 3, a car accident on a rainy November night that Daniel still couldn't drive past without his hands tightening on the wheel. Since then, it had been just the 2 of them, father and daughter, learning how to survive together. Every morning, the alarm went off at 5:15 a.m. Daniel would make 2 lunches, one for Lily's school, one for whatever job he currently had, and braid Lily's hair before the bus came, even though he'd never been very good at it. Lily never complained. She'd just smile and say, "It's perfect, Dad," even when it clearly wasn't. For 6 years, Daniel had worked at Crest Hill Manufacturing, operating machinery on the night shift. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the rent, kept the lights on, and let him pick Lily up from school most afternoons. He liked the rhythm of it, the hum of the machines, the quiet pride of a paycheck earned with his own 2 hands. Then, 3 months ago, Crest Hill shut its doors. Overnight, almost. A memo on a break room wall, a severance check that barely covered 1 month's expenses, and just like that, 340 people were out of work, Daniel among them. He'd applied everywhere since. Warehouses, delivery services, security positions. Most never called back. The ones that did offered wages that wouldn't cover rent and groceries in the same month. Daniel wasn't picky anymore. He wasn't proud, either, not in the way that mattered. He just needed something. "Dad, is everything okay?" Lily asked one evening, finding him at the kitchen table surrounded by bills, a calculator, and a look on his face she'd only seen a few times before. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," Daniel said, folding the papers closed. "Just doing some math. Are we going to be okay?" Daniel paused. 10 years old. And she already knew how to ask the questions that mattered. "We're always going to be okay," he said. That's a promise. He meant it. He just didn't know, yet, how he was going to keep it. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Daniel sat alone on the fire escape with a cup of coffee going cold in his hands, scrolling through job listings on his cracked phone screen. Most were the same disappointing options he'd already tried. Then, almost by accident, one listing caught his eye. Daniel had heard of Hale Industries, vaguely one of those massive companies with a glass tower downtown, the kind of place he'd never had a reason to walk into. He didn't know much about who ran it, and honestly, he didn't care. A steady paycheck was a steady paycheck. Health insurance was health insurance. Pride didn't pay for a 10-year-old's shoes. He clicked apply before he could talk himself out of it. Somewhere across the city, in a penthouse office 40 floors above the street, a man named Michael Hale was staring out at the skyline, thinking as he did almost every night about a stranger he had never been able to find. A man who had jumped into a rising river 9 years ago, pulled a drowning 8-year-old boy to shore, and vanished into the storm before anyone could learn his name. Neither of them had any idea how close they already were. The interview was set for a Tuesday morning. Daniel wore his only collared shirt, ironed carefully the night before, and arrived 20 minutes early at the towering glass building downtown. He'd never been inside a place like this: marble floors, a security desk with 3 uniformed guards, and an elevator that required a badge just to move. Janitorial applicants check in at the west lobby, a guard told him, barely glancing up. Daniel nodded and made his way over, feeling smaller with every step. He wasn't interviewing with executives, of course, just human resources. A woman named Carla who reviewed his paperwork with polite efficiency. 6 years at Crest Hill, she said, scanning his resume. Good references, clean record. We could use someone reliable on the evening crew, she smiled. Congratulations, Mr. Reeves. Welcome to Hale Industries. It was almost anticlimactic. How simple it was. No interrogation, no waiting weeks for a callback. Just a handshake, a stack of onboarding paperwork, and a start date 3 days out. Daniel left the building lighter than he'd felt in months. He picked Lily up from school that afternoon and took her for ice cream, a small splurge, but one that felt earned. "You got a job?" Lily asked, practically bouncing in her seat. "I got a job," Daniel confirmed. "What do you do there?" "I clean things. Keep the building nice. It's honest work." Lily reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you, Dad." Daniel had to look out the window for a second so she wouldn't see his eyes get wet. What Daniel didn't know, what he had no way of knowing, was that new hire paperwork at Hale Industries didn't just disappear into a filing cabinet. Company policy, instituted personally by Michael Hale himself, required that every single new hire's final documentation cross his desk before their first day. Not because he micromanaged every department, but because 9 years ago, something had happened that changed how Michael saw every single person who walked through his company's doors, especially the ones nobody else paid attention to. 9 years ago, Michael Hale had been a different man. Not yet. CEO, his father, still ran the company then. Michael had taken his 8-year-old son, Ethan, on a camping trip along the Kessler River, hoping to reconnect after a difficult divorce had pulled father and son apart. It had been a good weekend, right up until the storm rolled in without warning, and Ethan, chasing a runaway kite too close to the swollen riverbank, slipped and was pulled under by the current. Michael still remembered every second of it. The scream that tore out of his own throat, the freezing water, the sheer paralyzing terror of watching his son disappear beneath the surface, and knowing he wasn't a strong enough swimmer to reach him in time. And then a stranger, a man Michael had never seen before, camping alone somewhere downriver, had heard the screaming and sprinted into the water without a second's hesitation. He'd fought the current, pulled Ethan to the surface, and dragged both of them to the muddy bank, coughing and shaking, water pouring off them both. "Is he breathing?" Michael had screamed, collapsing beside his son. "He's breathing," the stranger had said, checking Ethan's pulse with steady, practiced hands. "He's going to be okay." Michael had tried to thank him, tried to get his name, his number, anything, but the man had simply helped Michael carry Ethan back toward the campsite, made sure paramedics were on the way, and then, in the chaos of the storm and the arriving ambulance, he was simply gone. No name, no contact information, just a soaked jacket left behind on the riverbank, and a description Michael had repeated to police so many times it was burned into his memory. Tall, dark hair, maybe mid-30s, a small scar above his left eyebrow. For 9 years, Michael had searched. He'd hired investigators. He'd posted in local newspapers along the Kessler River region. He'd funded a community award for unnamed acts of heroism, quietly hoping the stranger might someday come forward. Nothing had ever come of it. Ethan, now 17, had grown up knowing the story of the man who saved his life, a nameless hero his father never stopped looking for. And every single week, without fail, Michael personally reviewed new hire files, not because human resources required it, but because some small, stubborn part of him still believed that one day, the name he was looking for might simply appear in the ordinary paperwork of ordinary life. His executive team thought it was a strange habit. His close friends knew exactly why he did it. That Tuesday evening, a folder landed on his desk along with 40 other pieces of paperwork requiring his signature. Routine. Unremarkable. Michael almost didn't open it before heading home. He almost missed it entirely. But something made him pause on the third file down. New janitorial hire, evening shift, starting Thursday. Name, Daniel Reeves. Enafure, prior residence, Kessler County. Michael's hand stopped moving. Kessler County. That was the region along the river. That was exactly the region. He flipped to the attached employee photo standard ID capture from onboarding and felt the air leave his lungs. Dark hair, graying slightly at the temples now. Tired eyes that still held something steady in them. And there, faint but unmistakable above his left eyebrow, a small, thin scar. Michael Hale sat frozen at his desk, staring at the photograph of a stranger he had spent 9 years trying to find, who had by sheer impossible coincidence just applied for a janitor's position in his own building. His hands were shaking as he picked up the phone. "Carla," he said, his voice unsteady, in a way his assistant had never heard before. "The new janitorial hire, Daniel Reeves. Has he left the building yet?" There was a pause on the other end. "I don't think so, sir. He should still be in the west lobby finishing his badge photo." "Don't let him leave," Michael said, already standing, already moving toward the door. "I'm coming down. Right now." Daniel was zipping up his jacket, ready to head home, when the elevator doors opened with a sharp chime. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, moving fast, too fast for the calm, controlled atmosphere of the lobby. Security guards straightened. Carla from HR looked up, startled. Daniel barely noticed at first. He was tired. He was thinking about picking Lily up, about what to make for dinner, about the small, quiet relief of finally having a paycheck again. Then the man stopped directly in front of him. "Daniel Reeves?" Daniel blinked. "Yes, that's me." The man's eyes were scanning his face with an intensity that made Daniel take an instinctive half-step back. Then those eyes dropped just for a second to the faint scar above Daniel's left eyebrow. "Oh my God," the man whispered. "It's you!" "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" Daniel asked, genuinely confused. "Kessler River," the man said, his voice cracking. 9 years ago. A storm. A little boy who fell in near the bend by the old fishing dock. Daniel felt something cold move down his spine. The memory surfaced slowly, like it had been buried under nearly a decade of ordinary days. There was a boy. He went under near a kite. I was camping alone that weekend. "That was my son," the man said. "That was Ethan. You pulled him out of the water and you saved his life, and then you just disappeared. I've been looking for you for 9 years, Mr. Reeves. My name is Michael Hale. I'm the CEO of this company." The lobby had gone completely silent. Employees passing through had stopped walking. Carla stood frozen by her desk, hand over her mouth. Even the security guards seemed unsure of what they were witnessing. Daniel's mind was racing, trying to catch up. I didn't know," he said quietly. "I saw a kid in the water. I didn't think about who he was. You don't think in that moment. You just move. You saved my son's life and vanished before I could even get your name," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion he wasn't bothering to hide anymore. "I put your description in every local paper along that river. I hired investigators. I've spent 9 years wondering if I'd ever get the chance to say thank you to the man who pulled my boy out of that water. And today you walked into my building to apply for a job cleaning my floors." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "I needed the work," he admitted, quiet and honest. "My daughter and we've had a rough few months. I wasn't looking for anything from that day, Mr. Hale. I never wanted anything from it." "I know," Michael said. "That's exactly why I've never stopped looking for you." For a long moment, neither man spoke. The distance between them, the CEO in his tailored suit, and the exhausted father in his interview shirt, seemed to dissolve into something much simpler. 2 men and one impossible, life-altering moment 9 years in the past, finally colliding in a marble lobby on an ordinary Tuesday evening. "Ethan's 17 now," Michael said finally. wiping at his eyes without embarrassment. He plays baseball. He wants to study marine biology. Actually spends half his time near the water now, which used to terrify me. But I think some part of him has always wanted to go back to it. He talks about you. You know, not by name. He never had a name to use. He calls you the man from the river. He's going to lose his mind when I tell him I found you. Daniel didn't know what to say. He hadn't thought about that day in years. Hadn't let himself think about it, really. It had felt, at the time, like the only thing to do. You didn't stop to consider consequences when a child was drowning in front of you. You just moved. I don't know what you want me to say, Daniel admitted. I wasn't a hero. I was just a guy at the right place. You were the only place? Michael said firmly. You were the only person who moved. Do you understand that? Dozens of people were around that campsite that weekend. You were the one who didn't hesitate. Carla, still standing nearby, quietly stepped forward. Sir, should I process his paperwork differently, given the circumstances? Michael turned to her, then back to Daniel, something shifting in his expression, not pity, but a kind of fierce, grateful resolve. Mr. Reeves isn't cleaning my floors, Michael said. Not unless he genuinely wants to. Daniel, come upstairs with me. Let's talk. Not as an employer to an employee, just as one father to another. Daniel hesitated. Pride, exhaustion, and disbelief were all warring in his chest at once. I don't need charity, Mr. Hale. I appreciate what you're offering. But I don't want this to feel like it's not charity. Michael interrupted gently. It's overdue. There's a difference. Let me buy you a cup of coffee, and let's just talk. That's all I'm asking for tonight. Slowly, Daniel nodded. As they walked toward the elevator together, Michael pulled out his phone with trembling hands and typed a single message to his son. Ethan, I found him. I finally found him. Come to the office. Now. Daniel didn't take a job cleaning floors that week. What happened instead unfolded slowly, without fanfare, no press conference, no dramatic public announcement, nothing that Daniel would have wanted or asked for. Michael respected that. He understood, in a way few people could, that the kind of man who saves a stranger's child and walks away without leaving a name is not the kind of man who wants a spotlight. Over coffee that first evening, and several conversations in the weeks that followed, Michael learned about Rachel's passing, about Lily, about 6 steady years at Crest Hill Manufacturing that had ended without warning. And Daniel, slowly, cautiously, let himself learn about Ethan, about the divorce that had once fractured Michael's family, about 9 long years of searching that had never once gone cold. Michael offered Daniel a position not out of guilt and not out of obligation, but because Daniel's old plant experience and steady, careful leadership were exactly what Hale Industries' operations division needed. Daniel accepted, on one condition, that it be based on merit, reviewed like any other hire, with no special treatment beyond the interview he'd already earned. Michael agreed. He understood pride. He respected it. 3 weeks later, Ethan finally met Daniel properly. Not as a blurry memory from a storm-soaked riverbank, but face-to-face in the quiet of Michael's office. The 17-year-old, taller now than Daniel remembered even imagining, simply walked forward and hugged him without a word. Daniel, caught off guard, hugged him back. Thank you, Ethan said, his voice unsteady. I've wanted to say that for 9 years. You don't have to thank me, Daniel said softly. I'm just glad you're okay. I think about that day sometimes and wonder how it turned out for you. It turned out like this, Ethan said, smiling through tears. It turned out like I got to grow up because of you. Lily met Ethan not long after an easy, unexpected friendship blooming between the two kids who had, in very different ways, both been shaped by that single moment on the Kessler River. Lily, in particular, loved hearing Ethan tell the story of the man from the river, never quite believing, at first, that the quiet, humble father braiding her hair every morning was the same man in the story. You never told me you were a hero, Dad, she said one evening. Daniel just shrugged, the way he always did. I didn't think of it that way, sweetheart. I just did what anyone should have done. But that was the thing, wasn't it? Not everyone would have done it. Not everyone jumps into a rising river for a stranger's child without a second's hesitation. And not everyone walks away afterward asking for nothing in return. Daniel didn't become wealthy overnight. He didn't move into some grand estate or trade his old life for a new one. What he gained instead was steadier work, a stable path forward for his daughter, and something far rarer, a family who understood, in the deepest way possible, exactly what his quiet courage had once cost him, and given them both. There is a version of this story where Daniel simply mops floors in a building owned by a stranger, never knowing the connection sitting 9 floors above his head. There's a version where Michael never looks up from routine paperwork, never notices a small scar in a photograph, and 2 families that were bound together by one storm 9 years ago simply pass each other in hallways, forever unaware. But that isn't what happened, because sometimes the smallest, quietest acts of courage, the ones we do without expecting recognition, without waiting to be thanked, find their way back to us in moments we never could have predicted. Daniel Reeves didn't save a stranger's son hoping it would change his life 9 years later. He did it because it was the only thing to do. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Kindness doesn't ask what it will get in return. It simply moves when moving is needed and trusts that the rest will follow. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and share it with someone who still believes kindness matters. And before you go, leave a comment below. Kindness still exists if you believe even one good act can change someone's life.